First recording. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to a new episode of our show, Tawhid Spiritual Unity of the Three Principles. And today I'm joined here by my first amazing mentor, Mamoon Yusaf, as well as my co-host, Harry Dervinsky, and a lot of amazing bunch of people. And today's topic is going to be about how the Inside Out clarifies and unifies the three principles. So really, really good to have you here with us, Mamoon. And Mamoon was the first person who introduced me to this understanding that completely changed my life. And it's funny because the first time I've attended Mamoon's seminar, the Inside Out Paradigm by Keith Blevins. I was so Keith was talking about thinking and motion creates emotions, and Keith was like always telling me, no, it's not this, Omar, just stop it, just listen from blank slate. I got really annoyed by what Keith was telling me all the time, to just listen. It's like I'm listening, come on. But he meant like he's like he told me to listen from a blank slate, which I didn't know back then. Like I didn't know what I was talking about. And to be honest with you, I've told this before and I would say it again. I found Dr. Keith Blevins, really boring at the beginning because I came from a personal development background. I used to go to seminars like Tony Robbins seminars, and where people jump all over the place and with a lot of energy. So I was like, come on, man, just like speak it up. Just say what you have to say. Because Keith was speaking from a place like where he was trying to find his words. And I didn't get that what he was trying to convey or talk about doesn't have the right words. It's spiritual and it's so difficult to put it into words. So that's why he was using metaphors um, to point us to what he was describing. So the second day of the seminar is when the magic happened. This is where I really got interested on what Keith was talking about, because I fall into a space where all those, thoughts about Keith and about me and about people dropped away. And I felt into this amazing feeling of peace and joy, which I normally do when I meditate, when I used to meditate like every day. And I was like, oh my God, like, I don't know what this guy is talking about. Like, come on, like, just listen to what he has to say. I didn't get what he was talking about, but I knew that what he was pointing at was that there is something there that is really worthy of knowing, of getting. And this is where the journey started for me. And since then, I started reading books and bothering Mamoon with questions like, how can I, like, now, like, I'm not feeling joyful anymore or peaceful anymore. Like, why this is gone? And Mamoon was like, it's okay, like it's normal, and you're just feeling your thinking. So it was a really interesting experience for me, and a lot of people, my surroundings, my friends, like my friends at school, they noticed something changed in me that I didn't see at that point. And they've like, we haven't met in summer because it's a break, and then when we got back to school, second semester, the second year, I was studying psychology, by the way, if you don't know this, guys. But when I got back, people noticed something in me, and they were asking me questions like, what happened to you? Like, have you been studying all summer? Like, what happened? Just tell us. And I've I've shared what I came across with some people, and some people weren't uh, uh, kind of ready to hear what I was sharing, because I was, into self-development, and some of my classmates were against that, and they used to hate Tony Robbins, who used to be my idol back then. And the people that I've shared this understanding with, they've changed, from not speaking in the class, they start speaking up and raising their hands, and just finding, focusing more on their studies. So I'll share a bit more about these stories later, but now I'll give it over to Harry. Um,
Thanks,
so
thanks, Omar. First, Mamoon, it's obvious that you've influenced a lot of people uh, in the in the positive feelings of life. And well, I met Mamoon. I didn't know he was Mamoon at the 3PGC Global Conference, and he was talking with Rabbi Shoal Rosenblatt and Elsie Spittle about the universality of truth and different religions all pointing towards the same truth inside of us. And it was without a doubt the most inspiring and best presentation of the whole conference. It was a beautiful sharing, and you could feel the release of so much beautiful stuff. But I didn't know Mamoon then, and then we talked for a second, and we shared a feeling. And I said, "This man has a nice feeling, really, really nice feeling. I really like the softness and the humility and the strength of what he understands." And then uh, and just to reiterate that topic, in March, Mamoon is coming back with Rabbi Shoal Rosenblatt, and they're going to share this feeling that I just tried to describe, which I feel is really needed. And and then I because Mamoon was coming on, I listened to his book. I bought an audio book of it, and I was touched by the professionalism. Also, for someone who does not understand or know Muslim culture and religion and so on, it was very, very beautiful. And then when he blended it in with his understandings that he learned from Dr. Keith Blevins, I said, "Oh, this is really really nice way of doing it." And so I was again touched. And to be honest, Mamoon, I want to thank you for teaching me from the book, something. In some ways, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I don't know. So I'm open to learning. And of course, what I've seen is, wow, this the teachings by Muhammad are beautiful. Don't get a tattoo on and go ahead. And after Mamoon talks, we'll go into a group discussion.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. May the peace, love, and blessings of Allah be with each one of you. It's really wonderful to be here. Harry, when you said that, I think every Muslim in the world who's listening just had a big smile on their face, like, yeah, Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him. He had some good stuff. He had a few gems, like in every sentence. Yeah, so thank you for saying that, and thank you for reading the book. It's really an honor, and it's humbling. One of the ways that I see it is that the people that have been touched by the inside out understanding, also known as like the three principles paradigm understanding, the people that have been touched by it, they were going to get touched by it anyway. This is my belief. It came through insight, and that insight was destined for them, and it was going to happen. The people that read the book and were really deeply touched by the spiritual teachings of Islam, they were going to be touched by those spiritual teachings anyway. I was just lucky enough and blessed enough to somehow, through the work that has been happening, put myself in a position where their being touched through insight coincided with me being able to put the book in front of them. So, because Islam is a very beautiful path. It's a very beautiful path. And counterintuitively, it's not a religion that proselytizes itself, right? So followers of Islam, there are a few exceptions, but by and large, it's not like we have to go out and convert everyone to our way. But the problem is, because we don't have to, there may be a little bit of laxity on the other side, where we're just like, the Quran's been translated, let's let people figure it out, And I'm somewhere in between the two, where I'm like, well, there's so much treasure here, and there are so many gems that what if we were able to describe it in a way whereby it doesn't matter what background you have, it doesn't matter what your understanding is. And most importantly, the people in some ways closest to my heart are those who are spiritual, not religious, from all different backgrounds, right? That's why originally it was Hay House who published the book in the UK and the US and globally, right? And it's because their audiences largely resonates with that, like spiritual, not religious. That a lot of my closest friends are of that that understanding. And then, of course, when I came across the teachings of Sydney Banks and via Keith Blevins, it was kind of it was like a catalyst. It was like all of a sudden the things that I had been reading all my life came to life. They were already there. It wasn't like they weren't alive and vibrating the whole time, but now it came to life in my reading of it. And that was it. And one of the first seminars I attended actually was with Chip Chipman. And one of the first things he said to me when I was asking a lot of questions to Chip, and Jamie Smart was there as well. And I was actually asking him a lot of questions. And at one point, Chip, just before the seminar wrapped up, he said, look, one thing Sydney Banks would always tell us is keep going to your church. Go back to your religion. Keep reading your book. Keep reading the Bible. But this time when you read, really read. And this time when you're listening to the pastor or the priest, really listen. And that really struck me, and I took it to heart. And I started to read everything again with fresh eyes, right? Which isn't uncommon. Like Muslims read the Quran like all the time, right? So for me to go back and read it, I would have gone back and read it anyway, but now I was reading it with, it's kind of like my whole life I'd been reading spiritual wisdom, but with like the way an attendee of a seminar of mine once described it is he said, it's like we've been reading it, but we've got the wrong prescription glasses on. So we're reading all this stuff, but we can't really see what it's actually saying. We're misunderstanding the whole thing, you know, and it's, which is true to varying degrees. I mean, some people are just spiritual sages and they're reading it and they're light years ahead of me, obviously, right? So, but for me, it was just, if there's like one true understanding of how the mind works drops so much misunderstanding and so much illusion and so much mythology and so much of the things that sound convincing, but they're not true. And so with one clear understanding of how the mind works, all of a sudden, you can read and you'll be touched in a deeper way. And there's a saying which has been attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, which is, Man arafa nafsuhu arafa rabbuhu. The one who knows themselves knows their Lord. And if anything, by understanding how your mind works, you suddenly get a much deeper understanding of yourself. You suddenly can tell the difference between what's fictitiously being made up in your own mind and what's actually objectively true about yourself and about your mind. And what Sydney Banks really does is he opens a doorway into that truth. And truth is what we're going for. Truth is our goal. Truth is our aim. In Arabic, truth is al-haq, which is, it could be translated as the reality or truth with a capital T. But it's one of the names, it's what we call the names of Allah or the attributes of Allah. It's the ultimate reality, right? And so anything that can lead us to a deeper appreciation of truth is something that all Muslims everywhere in the world devote themselves to. Like no Muslim will ever say like, no, forget truth, I want falsehood, right? Which is why no Muslims ever get an understanding of the inside out. And they're like, no, forget it. I like my ego version better, right? It never happens. It's very profound. And for me, I guess one of the things I was asked to talk about was how the inside out understanding clarifies or unifies the three principles, and which is a little misleading because it's almost as if they're two different things, but to me, they're exactly the same thing. inside out, as described by Keith Blevins, is simply the truth that our experience is being created from the three principles of mind, consciousness, and thought. And specifically that feeling comes from thought in the moment. And it was interesting because I was asking Keith about this once, and he said, that's Dr. Keith Blevins, and he said he's very, very rigorous. He very rigorously and carefully reads and rereads everything from Sydney Banks. He's had a lot of the audio tapes and videos of Sydney Banks transcribed, and he, just so he can study them more carefully, because he's got his final writings and he wants, he's like, it's really sweet, because it's like, what do you do with the final writings of an enlightened man that you've got to put into a format whereby everyone can benefit from it? It's like, it's such a humbling task that he's been given that that it's just really touching to me. Like, he is, and as everybody knows, like, Keith and Velda are in no rush to get this book published, because they want to make sure they don't mess it up, right? They want to make sure that they can share with the world Sydney Banks's teachings in the truest, purest form possible. I think that's what, like, I don't know, ask them, interview them, right? But for me, it's been very touching, very, very important, because for me, there would be no way of wrapping my head around mind, consciousness, and thought without this little criteria which shows me exactly where it's relevant to my life. And the little criteria that shows me exactly, pinpoints where it's relevant to my life, is when I'm in the illusion that my feelings are coming from my spouse or our twin boys, both crying at the same time. Like, you rock one, he stops crying, the other one's crying, and I'm on dad duty and I have to put them both to sleep. It's like, oh, hang on a sec. All right, put that one down, rock the other one, and then the other one starts crying. It's like, just the little nugget of, hang on a second, your feelings, however stressed or frustrated or whatever, it's got nothing to do with the boys. It's got nothing to do with the twins. It's got nothing to do with your family. It's got nothing to do with your parents. It's got nothing to do with COVID. It's got nothing to do with the current state of the world or the current state of political affairs in the world. You're not feeling the state of the world. You're feeling your state of your mind in this moment. And that little, it's so simple and obvious and small that it seems negligible. And yet it brings the absolute relevance of the principles to life, for me at least, because it's like at every turn, it's like, oh, right, thought, right? And Sydney Banks would say over and over again in his tapes, if we listen to me, he would always say, that's how I found it, was through thought. Like, he had a deep, as I understand it, he had a deep realization into the nature of thought and realized the divine nature of mind, consciousness, and thought. And so that just, there's been something very powerful for me about just having that little criteria to like, because it seems little, but it's a game changer. And everyone, I think everyone here knows this. I think everyone here has a good understanding already of what I'm talking about. So how does that unify the three principles? Well, the way Sydney Banks said it is, if you, what you're looking for, and I'm always very, very hesitant to paraphrase an enlightened man, right? Because it's such a, and I know, Sydney Banks would continuously say, listen, it's not in the word, it's not the words I'm saying, it's beyond that, and which is true. And you want to be very careful when you're quoting an enlightened man. And I'll tell you something, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said to one of his companions, he said, when you transmit something from me, transmit it exactly as you heard it. Because perhaps the one you're transmitting it to will take something that the transmitter didn't get. I don't know if you caught that, but when you're, in other words, when you're passing on a saying, so Islam is an oral tradition, the Prophet, peace and blessings upon him, would say these wise things, and the people around him would memorize them and pass them on to others. But he would be very particular about this. Like, if you're going to pass this on to other people, make sure you say it exactly as I said it. Because otherwise it can become Chinese whispers, right? Secondly, the prophet's reasoning, peace and blessings be upon him, was maybe the one who you're sharing it with will take more than you, right? So I was about to quote Sydney Banks, and then I just had to catch myself and be like, all right, just so everybody knows, this is Mamoon's paraphrase of Sydney Banks, right? But he would say that the secret, what we're looking for is the secret we're looking for is thought. What you're looking for is the secret to thought. And when you have the secret to thought, you've got the secret to consciousness. And when you have the secret to consciousness, you've got the secret to mind. So if you can get any of these psychological realities, mind, consciousness, or thought, which they're all so inextricably bound with each other, they're almost inseparable, right? Like, how do you, because they're all formless, and how do you describe where mind ends and consciousness begins, or where thought, like it's beyond, at least beyond it's beyond my intellectual grasp and beyond my ability to articulate, at least. And so one of the things that I really love about the way that Keith Blevins teaches is he doesn't try explaining to you what mind is, and he doesn't try explaining what consciousness is, and he doesn't try explaining what thought is. Instead, he tends to start his presentation with like, all right, so here's what Sydney Banks said. And then he'll just list Sydney Banks' quotes referring to mind, consciousness, and thought. None of them are really a definition. Have you ever noticed that? Like, Sydney Banks would rarely give you an actual definition of thought or an actual definition of mind or consciousness, which is fascinating. Because like I once was having a session with Dr. Keith about this, and he said, sure, I mean, try defining God. And that really stopped me. I was like, oh, yeah, like we're not dealing with some small intellectual academic thing here, right? When Sydney Banks would talk about divine thought and divine consciousness and divine mind, or universal thought and universal consciousness and universal mind, he was talking about universal, formless, spiritual principles that are self-evident and obviously at play all the time. It's very hard to define them. So, and whenever you're listening to Sydney Banks, you don't get the feeling you're in a philosophy class. You get the feeling you're in like human school or something. Like, oh, this is what I've been wanting to hear my whole life about the truth of how my experience. Oh, okay, right. And the minute you hear him speak, you just, it's very hard to describe, but one student of Sydney Banks said to me that that he could appreciate that his whole life, no, it was Dr. Keith. He said he could appreciate that his whole life, he didn't realize the gravity of the words of prophets because he'd never met them, right? He's like, I'm sure in religious school and in a madrasa, I think like they can try and teach another words of prophets like Abraham, peace and blessings upon him, or Moses, peace and blessings upon him, or some people believe Buddha, peace and blessings upon him, and Jesus, peace and blessings upon him, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon them all. Their words, firstly, it's just so humbling to hear the words of an enlightened person, and it can be made into something very simplistic and something very they can be underestimated. They can be underestimated, right? And the reason I'm sharing this, I guess, is just to point out that for people who are blessed to meet Sydney Banks, there seems to have been something very deep and very powerful transferred by him to his students that we're not getting just by listening to his tapes, right? And that's something that has occurred to me after listening very carefully to a lot of you, Harry. I'm talking to you, and
Can I just interject for a sec?
yeah,
I don't totally agree with that.
okay,
The slant of it was different on Salt Spring. The feeling we were much lower level of consciousness, so we never could listen to the words because they were so far beyond where we were that there was no possibility. In fact, the only thing I ever remember listening to Sid was shut up, what the pure truth is being spoken, and I'm thinking, for that, and the feeling that you're picking up is indeed a deep spiritual feeling,
right,
the feeling that we all have within us. And when I listened to Kathryn talk over the weekend, I could feel she had the same feeling that we're expressing, but of course through her emanation of consciousness and so on. When Mark talks, who also was on Salt Spring, he talks differently than I talk, but the reverence we have is because in those days it wasn't practical application. It was emerging from a whole set of beliefs. We were all hippies of some version or another. I was wilder, much wilder than Mark was, and off the wall type of guy. But the pursuit was a spiritual, the same thing that Muhammad was teaching. A pursuit was a spiritual connection to God, or our understanding. And it was just fluke luck that we had walked into pure truth, the pure truth as uncovered by Sydney Banks. So we never changed because that's how we entered it. But when the people come from different ways, and Keith Blevins to Sydney Banks, well, Keith Blevins is, I spent a year with Keith with the indigenous people. I can tell you he was very well received, but he wasn't Sydney Banks. He was coming from a totally different angle, which released the truth of uncovered, and then the in-depth feelings, deeper feelings, because there's always more, and Sid would always emphasize that aspect. So we have no choice but to be who we are. That's just who we are, and that's how we came into it. But I don't agree that we're deeper. Why we have some appreciation of Sid, yes, a little bit deeper.
That's exactly what I mean. Yeah. That's exactly what I mean. Yeah.
And what that means is when we hear people talk about Sid, they're talking about their image or impression of what an enlightened human being is.
Right.
And it's not the truth, guys. It's just like, just an ordinary guy, who happened to have an enlightenment experience, and very, very ordinary guy, beautiful. But you come in his presence, this is the other thing, elevator of levels of consciousness, just like, wow. But I got trapped in that. I gave Sid the power of who I am. And because of that, I stopped growing. It's the essence. He only had one message, and this is with this stuff. It's inside you. That's it. That's all inside you. You have a feeling from being around Sid. That's coming from you. Yes, he's got the elevator, but that's not worshiping. Following was not Sid's way.
Good. Beautiful. That's the essential teaching that all Muslims believe. You never worship the messenger or the prophet or anything. You worship the one, the source of all that is.
And what the prophet represents is an example of what an ordinary grade 9 educated welder could fluke into an experience. And if he could experience that and live the way he lived, sacrificing everything for the truth, everything he only wanted one goal: alleviate suffering of one human being. And hopefully that would spread, of course. But that's all he really cared about. So he was totally compassionate and loyal. You know, he had no reason to stay with as a friend of mine. I was a total pain in the ass, excuse the expression. Allah, please forgive me. You know, but but you know, but he that's why he could stay ordinary. He was ordinary. He was an ordinary guy who just happened to have what Kathryn has experienced on a level, what Mark has experienced on a level, what Omar, and when I met Omar, it was that feeling. That feeling, that's all. It wasn't a form, we should do this, it was just a fluke. We even met, it was a fluke. We even met Kathryn, it's a fluke. I've never met her actually, but you know what I mean? It's just a fluke, you know, type of thing. So Sid fluked.
That's where I disagree with you. There are no flukes.
Okay. Oh, okay. What do you mean by that?
Everything. So there's an Islamic belief, right, which is it's called qadr, which is whatever hits you was never going to miss, and whatever misses you was never going to hit.
I believe that.
Yeah.
That of course is true as well.
From our perspective, it looks like a fluke. There's no flukes.
No, it's his word. It's his words. That's just his words.
Right.
Yeah, you know, type of thing. But wow, did he take it somewhere?
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I'd love to hear from everyone else. Mark, I think is this the first time we're meeting, Mark? You're muted. Can we?
Hi, yes. Hi. Yeah, it is the first time I've met you, Mamoon. I met Omar before one time, and it's great to meet you. You look like a lovely person. Yeah. So aren't we all lovely people when we can get out of our own way, eh? And resonate with what the truth is, like you say. Traveling, living in different countries, found that it didn't feel like that was the answer anymore. And I thought I'd go back to university in Victoria and maybe I'd find more meaning. I was really looking for more meaning, which had been building over time, you know, through different experiences. And I found that the university wasn't giving me that. I had one philosophy teacher who was kind of interesting. But when I told him I'd gone onto the island just to visit a friend before going off to work for the Forest Service in BC, and then I was planning to go to a monastery or something. I had in my mind that the next step would be maybe a monastery in Hawaii or something. I wandered onto the island, onto Salt Spring Island, just to see my friend for a week.
Yeah.
This is an example of how you're led. He was working for a couple. You've heard of Linda Quiring, maybe, the lady who was so psychiatrically damaged that they had held out no hope for her to ever recover. And she had met Sid and written this book, The Island of Knowledge. And anyway, my friend was working as an apprentice carpenter for the husband, Bill Gaudu. And I told him how much I was looking for something. And he said, well, my friend knows an recently enlightened man. I said, oh, I'd like to meet him. And they invited him over to their house and me and Sid, just Sid. And he was sitting on the hearth there and you're talking a little bit. And I knew that he knew the truth. I didn't hear him big time, like, so deeply that it broke me through, but I knew he was talking the truth. And at that moment, I realized that I couldn't go off and work for the Forest Service, that I had to drop everything and move to the island, live on the island. And that was 4 or 5 years of good fun on the island. But then, then some of us it didn't actually snap through to another state of mind. We kept listening, we kept feeling this beautiful feeling of every time we'd go and hear him speak. It was just magical. And, there were a lot of good times and a lot of good sharing and beautiful things, but it took 35 years for me to finally break through, where I started seeing the beauty of the truth and of its ability to change people. And how you can make the mistake of hanging on to regret and things sometimes, and that'll keep you back for years and years. If you have a divorce and somehow it's been because of your becoming irritable or taking on things that you were never designed to do, or working so hard to prove that you can do something when you were given beautiful gifts that you turned down, So there's many a lesson along the way, but finally I got tired of that state of regret and opened up somehow, that I just wasn't trying so hard, and saw some beautiful changes in people, really saw it and really started. And anyway, this feeling of beauty is what led me into all of a sudden, for me, a totally different state of mind where you're just feeling God, or, energy. Anyway, I could go on, but I don't want to monopolize the stage here.
Well, I would love it. Please do go on. Yeah, it's just so.
So it just, you don't realize,
I want to hear everyone's stories,
Yeah. You really don't know that these states of mind exist until you experience them, truly experience them. And then you're given nuggets of, more and more insights that, we're trying too hard. We're too serious about life. We're guided way more than we know, like you say. Yeah.
So Mamoon, one of the special qualities of Mark and I we were on Salt Spring. We did experience a spiritual insight experience, just for me, oneness. Yet 35 years before you break through. And you know what the outstanding quality is, and it's the most important quality for all of us: gratitude. Can you feel it in Mark? Can you feel his gratitude? Like, it's amazing to be in truth, living in the atmosphere and friendship of Sydney Banks, and then sort of feeling like you lost it. And then coming back and realize you never lost anything. You just had to learn a few other things along the way until the tipping point was reached. And boy, does that feel good. Because after 35 years, he's still the same. He's back to peg one.
Yeah.
With gratitude, though.
Yeah,
with a lack of gratitude.
That is the doorway, or a doorway anyway, in behind the scenes. It's that feeling of gratitude, isn't it, finally?
How lucky all of us are.
There's a beautiful verse of the Quran that says, if you're grateful, we will increase you It literally says we will increase you. Often translated as we will give you more, but that's thinking in material terms. It literally says when you're grateful, we'll increase you, and that's absolutely true. And you're right. When you said it, I was like, oh yeah, that's what it is. It's gratitude. That's what I was hearing in Mark's story all the way through. Like how amazing to ever come across spiritual teachings of truth. Like it's like hitting the jackpot.
It is the jackpot. It's the only jackpot too. It's the only real jackpot.
The jack, right? That's right.
Everything else is an illusion.
Right.
So Muhammad got it right. Sydney Banks got it right. And we got it wrong.
Listening to them all day long, and we still got it wrong.
And we will still get it wrong. That's part of the human experience, really.
That's there.
All
That's what
counts.
Keith is pointing towards. That's right.
It's just that we we learn how to get gentler with ourselves and be okay with whatever we feel, you know, and not really associating that feeling to an outside circumstance, because it's not the case. This is where I guess all mental illnesses starts from, where we associate this you know, harsh feeling with the events outside, instead of just, you know, just experiencing it. That's the human experience. Just see it for what it is. It's a feeling coming from our thinking, and it's going to pass by as long as we have another thought. And that's relieving. That's just beautiful to know that you're backed up. Whatever happens to you, you're always fine, no matter what you think is going bad in your life. You're fine. It's just that you don't see it at that point. Don't see it clearly. Thinking. And this is where it's really important to kind of be okay with whatever we experience, because we rise above that situation. We see hope, we see solutions. We leave space for our mind to, you know, have solutions for a certain problem. And that's just beautiful, isn't it?
I don't, you know, I'm kind of a guy who doesn't really like to think too much about problems, so I don't, you know, type of thing. And so I actually don't really like to think too much about the psychological reality we live in. I like, I have found my thinking seems to stop the flow of love that comes from my heart and the love that life offers. But what you're talking about, Omar, is fundamental to what everybody has to understand. Because when I didn't understand that, and that's what Mark and I didn't understand, what Omar just described, we didn't grasp that. So we were victims of our own psychological nature. It was interesting, once we uncovered that little pearl that Omar is talking about, we just went back to the spiritual. But we had this added valuable piece that we needed, or else we were a loose cannon. or I was a loose cannon. Mark was never a loose cannon, I was. But once the two worlds became one, that was peace. That was by the grace of Allah, or God, Allah willing.
I remember it might have been the conference where we met, but it was A3 Principles conference, and sometimes I walk around with this, right, prayer beads, and I had them on me because, especially at a conference like that, you can just be blown away. You never know where your next insight's going to come from, and all these amazing people are sharing things with the audience. And so I had it with me, and I was just like saying to myself, Alhamdulillah, like just gratitude. All praise and gratitude is for Allah. And I was just repeating it. And someone comes over to me and is like, what do you do? Oh, he's like, I thought, that there were, like, when you get this understanding, there are no techniques. And I was like, yeah. I was like, mate, this isn't a technique. I'm not doing this so that I get somewhere, right? I'm doing this because, like you were just describing, when you see the psychological, whatever, trap, ego trap, whatever you want to call it, you're thrown back deeply into the spiritual. And then it's like, there's nothing but gratitude and love and presence. And it's almost like, for a Muslim who's like reads the Quran and that kind of thing, it's like, it's almost, you can't be this present, you can't be deeply present without just being overwhelmed with wanting to praise Allah. I was looking for another word, but no, without just wanting to praise Allah. So I absolutely get that. It's but as soon as you get the slightest glimpse of this understanding, it just sends you so much deeper into the source.
And I might add, when you're doing it from your new understanding, you're not doing it as a technique. It's actually taking you deeper into the pure consciousness. You love it. It's because you love it. It brings something. So when you're doing it from the intellect, it is a technique. But when you're doing it from what makes you feel good and what connects you, brings that sacred feeling into you, it's a totally different type of experience.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most common things I've heard from Muslim audiences. Like if I just check back and get back in touch with them a few months later, and there's a few of them are here actually. One of the most common things I hear is, before, I thought that I should pray 5 times a day, and I don't, and I'm like feeling very guilty about it or beating myself up, and it's like prayer's a chore. But now I just feel so grateful that I just want to pray, and when I pray, it's a prayer of gratitude. It's not a chore anymore. It's not a
it's
not like
pure prayer. Pure prayer.
It's like something that's
It's
just
not a coping mechanism, Mamoon.
Say that again.
It's not a coping mechanism.
It's not a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because like here's the thing. Like, yeah, I guess I've heard this in one of your seminars, and it stayed with me. Sorry. When we pray, it doesn't help Allah. It doesn't benefit Allah. He's the Almighty. It benefits us.
Right.
And that was like mind blowing for me when I heard it. Because like, yeah, it's so true. This infinite intelligence doesn't need my little mind to get through life.
Yeah.
And it changed a lot of things for me, and especially when it comes to prayer. Now there is I don't know, like it's so much more beautiful than it used to be. Because I used to have a lot of thinking about that. Now it's just more of, remembering who I truly am. Because when I remember who I truly am, I'm with Allah, the infinite intelligence. And that's why we pray. That's one of the reasons why we pray 5 times a day as Muslims, because it reminds us to wake up from our nightmares. And that's why we have adans in Muslim countries, to, like, when you're doing your work and you're thinking too much and you hear Allahu Akbar, and then you say Allahu Akbar, and then you come back to the present moment. You come back to truth,
Right.
to that always exists, which is now. That's the only thing that exists. And from there, I can create. From there, I can navigate smoothly through life. When I'm connected, aligned with infinite intelligence, Allah. Yeah, I just want to ask if anyone has anything to share or to add. We haven't heard from anyone really. Just
Kathryn, what's happening?
Mark.
I was just about to, actually.
I'm glad I've asked.
The concept in Islam that I think has really grown for me through this understanding is what we call tawakkul. And I heard many people in the conference over the weekend, particularly Dickens, talking about, I'm okay because I know there's, that universal wisdom there to save me. From our Islamic perspective, I know I'm always okay because Allah is always there. We have, I guess, different language, but the same understanding. And so for me, it's that if I'm not feeling the okay, it's very easy to quickly remember I am actually okay because it's all in Allah's hands. It's not in my hands. So I really resonated a lot with what many of the 3 Ps veterans were saying in that, but we understand it in the term tawakkul, putting our trust, our faith in Allah, knowing that it's not in our hands. I see myself not at all worried about the outcome, but just how am I showing up? What am I doing right now? Am I doing what is the most pleasing thing to Allah? And that's it. How it turns out is not in my hands. And that just takes all the thinking off your mind. And then you can be here right now in this present moment. And it's the most amazing experience. So, Jazakallah khair, Mamoon. Mamoon is the one who introduced me also to this understanding. And it's been a very profound change. Instead of living Islam like it's this black and white version of whatever it is that they're teaching out there, I've discovered all the colors of the rainbow in Islam. And I'm now actually doing a course with Professor Muhammad Abdullah in Sharia, and just seeing that Sharia is also got all the colors of the rainbow too, but what we're being taught out there, they're missing this understanding, and so it's coming across as black and white. And I just love all the colors. That actually wasn't what I was intending to say when I started speaking, but that's how it works, right?
Yeah, that's how wisdom works.
There's an advantage, Kathryn, to seeing it from different angles. It really adds a more worldly picture. It's a little bit like people who travel have a more worldly perspective on life than those who've only been in one place all their life. And when you're talking, I can feel you're garnishing strengths from the 3P world, strengths from the Muslim world, and bringing them into not truth, into you and who you are. Because in the end, that's all you want, is to be true to who you are. And so that union expands consciousness. And
Mamoon used to always say, you're perfect just the way you are. And of course, most of us didn't believe a word of that at the beginning. It's like, yeah, right. You know, if I'm so perfect, why is my world such a mess? But my world is still a mess because the challenges and tests never go. But I see how, you know, Allah created each and every one of us how we are meant to be. So we are perfect just the way we are. We're not perfect in how we show up. That was never meant to be. But we're perfect in how we were created. And so really honoring that is the most beautiful space to be in. That warts and all, and I don't have many warts, but we're perfect just in how we show up. And that has been probably a huge shift for me, because spending probably the majority of my life in abusive backgrounds, you get told who you are and what you're not good enough at all the time. So to totally embrace the fact that, you know what, Allah created me like this. I have a purpose like this. I don't have to change. I can do better, of course, but this is perfect. Alhamdulillah. I love that. And thank you for reminding us, Mamoon.
It's not me.
It's true that now that I'm teaching others, it's like, it's rarely me in the room. I just come and show up and I wait to see what just comes, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing this, Kathryn. So lovely to connect with you. Does anyone got anything to share before we end this call? That was beautiful, by the way. Really beautiful.
Yeah. And thank you, Omar. Thank you for setting this up. Harry as well. It's really it's a really good thing that taking this understanding, whatever, just taking this understanding and just sharing it as widely as you can and as deeply as you can. There's nothing better in the world, and I'm very humbled that you very humbled to be invited to share with all of you, and I've been learning a lot just by being here, really, from everyone who's spoken so far.
Me too.
Those who haven't spoken, just from your energy. How woo-woo can I go here? I think the energy of everyone who's here is uplifted the conversation. Yeah, but no, seriously, it's really great. Thank you.
And I'll make this quickly this time. I'll make it into a podcast as well for those who want to listen to it in that medium. And share it, please. Share it.
Yeah.
You know, that's
sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring. And we don't know what we're doing, so you know.
And also, by the way, me thanking you didn't mean that we have to end. Like, if anyone else wants to share, I've got all night.
Yeah.
Ish. I've got until my wife tells me otherwise. So.
Well, I think we approached the end of this amazing Zoom meeting. Thank you, Mamoon, for accepting our invitation. That was amazing. I've learned so much. Well, since we've known each other, I mean, not just today, I've always learned so much from you, from your sharings and wisdom. And I'm really grateful to cross paths with you, because you were the first person who introduced me to this. You were the first person who dared stop my arrogance.
As big as it was.
That was a pleasure.
Well, he did it in a subtle way, you know, like I thought that I knew enough that I could, you know, share with people and, you know, tell them how to retrain their brain to be more positive and this and that. And then
I'm always trying to, I
and then
remember
came
he was like, in one of the Zikr gatherings, he was like trying to convince me about a Tony Robbins technique. I was like, obviously, I've studied all Tony Robbins stuff that's available publicly. And
No,
secondly,
I'm embarrassed all over Facebook, not just on YouTube. Thank you, Mamoon.
and by the way, all due respect to Tony Robbins, teaches the best stuff he knows.
Yeah.
Okay? I would
Absolutely.
like it would be wonderful if a Tony Robbins type would coincide with the teachings of Sidney Banks and be able to with that articulation and energy and passion and everything, you know, be able to get this out even further. Fortunately, we have Omar, so I think it's going to happen. I think we have our.
And we have Michael Neal, who's sort of our
Yeah,
Toby.
I'll be like, put your hands up and say, we feeling our thinking in the moment.
No, I'm not going to take that. But you know, you're able to dance, play the right music.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for coming.
We should have ended the recording
joining
before
us
this.
today.
It's like the after party conversation happening right now. Like,
Now we would like to include everyone really to our after. We do the after party before we stop the recording. That's how it works in Tawhid. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming in today. Really appreciate you joining us, and thank you for those who shared.
Excuse me, Omar. We meet
Yeah.
the first Thursday and third Thursday of each month, and we have the teachings of Rumi coming next, and then Dr. Bill Pettit to wrap up the year for us, type of thing. So just, I'm sorry for cutting you off.
Sounds
Omar,
good. No,
yeah.
that was like right on the spot. So yeah, thank you for coming in, and see you in 2 weeks' time. And the topic gonna be Rumi's quote, basically. Thank you, everyone.
So nice.
Thank you, Mamoon.
Teacher.
Thank you.
See you again.
Thanks for sharing, Mark. That was beautiful.